Good morning, everyone. My name is Lenny Cecchio, and I'm the president of the Philadelphia County Dental Society. Thank you for registering for our free live webinar in conjunction with Friedman, LLP. We all know COVID-19 has placed a tremendous hardship on us as the dental industry, and we're thankful that Friedman has offered to coordinate this webinar in order to provide us with a better understanding of the government assistance programs that are available for our practices. I'd now like to introduce to you David Gottlieb with Friedman. David?
Thanks, Dr. Cecchio. So just a quick backstory. We put this together. Friedman, including myself, has worked with Philadelphia County Dental Society for several years now. And with the current pandemic, hopefully easing up soon, and the state of the economy and businesses in and around the Philadelphia region, we thought it'd be a good idea to just provide some support for the organization and its members. So by now, in the timeline of the stimulus package, many of you are probably already aware of the programs and the application process. Hopefully, many of you are already able to get your applications in. But now that businesses are starting to receive funds, more questions are starting to pop up as to how to use the funds and what will be forgiven. I mean, many businesses, including dentist offices, aren't even open yet, aren't allowed to be open yet. So how does that affect the forgiveness? I'm sure you've all been inundated with a lot of these CARES Act and PPP guidance from banks, lawyers, and accountants like ourselves the past month. But we haven't really seen anything targeted at a particular audience. So with our ties to the Dental Society and the experience and expertise that the two presenters today have working with dental professionals, we thought it'd be a good idea to offer something more relevant to this industry. Jerry and Lee have over 45 years combined experience in public accounting, working primarily with medical and dental practices ranging in size from sole practitioner to group practices. They'll provide a quick overview of the CARES Act, and then we'll open it up to questions. We did receive some questions in advance. We'll try to hit those during the presentation, but if not, we'll answer those at the end. And then also feel free to, there's a question and answer feature in Zoom that you could feel free to ask questions throughout the presentation. We'll try to answer those at the end. So with that, I'll introduce Lee Shields. I think is starting us off.
Yep. Thanks, David. Thanks, Lenny, for letting me participate. This has been a crazy little ride for a little over a month since the president signed the CARES Act on March 27th. You know, when our politicians, when government, when they enact new tax laws, typically, you know, there's some things that are missed. There's loopholes. There's some inconsistencies in the language, and that's when they take months and months and months to do it. This was done in 2 or 3 weeks, and this one absolutely has some, you know, some holes in it, things that we're constantly still waiting for. You're going to hear me and Jerry talk on several times during this webinar where we just don't know. We're waiting for guidance. We'll offer our opinion as to what it might look like or what we're hearing, but unfortunately, as we hear on May 1st, some people already have this money, and we don't quite have all the answers, but we're going to try to give you as much as we can at this date. David, are you able to share the outline, if you could? So again, the president signed the CARES Act on March 27th, 800 and some odd pages. I think it's a wonderful program, right? Unlike any other SBA program I've ever seen, no collateral, no personal guarantees. If you've ever been in an SBA process before, typically it's a tedious process. Well, this one isn't. It's a 4-page application. Very, very quick, aptly named Paycheck Protection Program. I mean, it's exactly what the intent was. This seminar, which I've done numerous times, if I was doing it 3 or 4 weeks ago, I would have spent a lot of time on eligibility. What's my loan amount? What can I spend the money on? We're gonna touch on those real quick. But because here we are a little further along, maybe some of the people in this webinar have already received their PPP money. We're gonna really dive into the loan forgiveness piece, try to give you some answers there, at least the ones that we may have or we're expecting. So again, it's called the Paycheck Protection Program. 2 rounds have already been issued, 349 billion with a B, 310 billion with a B, just a crazy amount of money. Who's eligible? Wow, has this changed? You know, originally it was like anybody under 500 employees can apply. Then about a week ago, we started hearing on the internet and on TV, the Shake Shacks, the Ruth Chris, the Los Angeles Lakers went for the PPP loan. And last Friday, they came out and said, hey, hold on here. You know, originally the only certification you were going to have to make was that there was current economic uncertainty. Well, who couldn't check that box, right? Back a month ago, there was unbelievable economic uncertainty. Now they're starting to have little different language. They came out with a question 31 on the SBA website the other night. And now they're saying, hey, remember, you got to have current economic uncertainty, but what's your current business activity look like? I think everybody on this webinar, you know, because of the nature of our business, the dental community, and we're not completely open yet, I think we could all still check that box. Current business activity has been significantly impacted. So I think we're all still good. So back to eligibility, again, less than 500 employees. You had to have been around on February 15th. That's a key one there. Employees and self-employed changed dramatically over the month as well. Originally, you know, they were talking about if I own a dental practice and I have a physician that comes in and it's more like a per diem or an independent contractor because they work for multiple offices, can I include that person in my PPP Act? And originally, there was some language that independent contractors, yes, but they did come out about 10 days after the act and said, no, 1099 independent contractors are not eligible for the practice in their PPP because those 1099 individuals are allowed to apply for their own PPP. So that one changed a little bit. That was question 15 back when some of the regulations started coming out. Couple other ineligibilities, you know, if you have had some past hiccups, if you've ever had an SBA that didn't go perfect, you had some delinquencies or defaulted. So again, also you got to be able to check all the boxes as far as if you're eligible. How much you can borrow, in my opinion, is relatively straightforward. You know, that it's named the Payroll Protection Program. So your loan amount is primarily driven by payroll. So what the president signed on March 27th said prior 12 months. But then what we learned was you could use either calendar year 2019 or prior 12 months. And most want you to use prior 12 months because it is so much easier to prove. Grab your W-3, your W-2s, your 940. That's my 2019 payroll. But it's not just payroll, it's payroll costs. So they lumped a couple real big ones in my opinion, good ones. One is health insurance. Now remember, the health insurance is just the company paid. So if you're running a practice where, you know, the premiums are X, but your employees have a copay or money taken out of their pay to help pay the burden of the health insurance, you only are allowed to include the company portion of health insurance. Another one I thought was great was retirement costs, right? So if you have a plan that has a safe harbor or a profit sharing kicker, you were allowed to include that in there. So what you did was you grabbed your payroll for the year 2019, you divided it by 12, so you got a monthly number, and you multiplied that times 2.5. Pretty simple. That's your loan amount. So they were pretty good about trying to simplify how much someone could borrow. There's a couple of other things in there. The state unemployment, originally they said state taxes, so people were throwing in all kinds of different things, but it's really the copay that you pay on your PAUC unemployment. Another big question with regards to the loan amount, are employers, are the business owners eligible? We waited weeks to find out if a partner in a partnership was eligible, and we learned that they are. They came out with an FAQ that yeah, if you're running your practice under a model of an LLC, a partnership, then yeah, you are, but you get capped at 100,000. That's important. We're also starting to hear that owners of the company will only be allowed to include that 100,000 in their calc. No retirement or health insurance on top of that. So that's another big one as well. So again, you compute your average monthly costs, you divide it by 12, and then you multiply by 2.5, and you're good to go. I will tell you that particular calculation is, we're going to talk about the costs in a little bit, or the forgiveness piece, but they changed the forgiveness piece just a little bit in that it's not it's not 2/12 for the 8 weeks. It's 8 weeks over 52 weeks. So that's going to create a little bit of a discrepancy as well. Number 4 there also real quick, if you did have an EIDL loan, which is economic injury disaster loan, that would be added to your PPP loan and pretty much taken out, or it would be in place of that. So that they don't want 2 of those programs in place at one time. The rates, the terms of this has changed dramatically. When the president signed it, it was 3.75 over 10 years. I think they got worried that people were going to take out PPP loans and just because the terms were great, they were just going to hang on them for a long period of time. So that has changed dramatically. The rate's 1%, still a great rate, but it's 2 years. So there is a 6 months deferral from the day you get the loan, but I want to warn everybody, interest starts accruing the day you get your loan. The 8-week period starts the day you get your loan. So a lot of things trigger. The clock starts, if you will, the day you get funded by your particular borrower. So that's really, really important. As far as the use of funds, there's a lot of controversy out there. And here's where we're really, really waiting for guidance. A is easy, payroll costs. It's pretty much already been defined. The definition of payroll costs when you're applying for the loan is pretty similar to the definition of what costs can be used with the loan. The next couple items we're really hoping to get some clarity on. Mortgage interest payments. The language in the code said it said covered debt. There's popular opinion out there that other things might be included, as you can see down below. Equipment, interest on equipment leases for dental practices, equipment for autos, copiers, items like that. And, are these things eligible? Rent, I am very anxious to see. Most of my dental practices own their real estate. Really, really anxious to see if rent paid to a related party counts. It should, right? We have separate LLCs that hold the property. I really hope they include that where the landlord and the tenant are the same person, but anxious to see that. Utility is going to be a big one. We're hearing internet's in there. All your internet usage, cloud storage, all those things are a part now of your utility expenses on top of your normal ones, electricity and gas and water and such. So the use of the funds is very interesting because you're allowed to use them for more than just payroll. Think about the calc, right? The calc was 2.5. Well, payroll should be 2 because you have the average monthly cost times 2. So that 0.5 kicker, if you will, I think that's what they were intending for these other items that are eligible. There is a cap on these other items. The cap is 25%. That's really, really important. So let's use numbers for a second. If you were lucky enough to get a PPP loan for $100,000, you have to spend $75,000 on payroll. That's the whole purpose of this. You are a conduit. They're using you as the employer to keep paychecks in the pockets of your employees. They couldn't just give it directly to them. That was the stimulus program. So they're using you as a conduit. They're going to give you this money. We want you to go ahead and pass it through to your employees. And oh, by the way, you have to spend 75% of it on that. If you do, we're going to go ahead and pick up some of these other expenses, utility, rent, mortgage, interest, et cetera. But you have to, they really, really want 75% of this money to be spent on the intended purpose, which is payroll, which I guess is also the purpose to try to get people off their state unemployment rolls, get them onto this program. So it's been, it's gone, I guess, there's been some bumps, right? A lot of bumps with regards to the banks, with the SBA. I think the SBA published that they typically do about $20 billion a year in SBA loans. And you saw earlier, this is north of $600 billion. So the fact that it's been pulled off, I know there's been some hiccups, but I think I think the program is phenomenal. Rarely do you ever get a program where you have no collateral, no personal guarantee, and oh, by the way, you don't have to pay us back. There's no better terms than that, right? So I think the program's intentions are good. We just need more guidance. People are in that 8-week period and they need to know, what's the forgiveness look like? So Jerry, that's a pretty good lead into, I think, which is the most topical part of our program today, which is the forgiveness piece. Do you want to take it from there and discuss that?
Sure. Thanks, Lee. Good introduction. I appreciate that. This is the third leg of the program. First leg is how much can I borrow? The second leg is what can you use it for? And now this is where the rubber meets the road. How much can I get forgiven? And we're going to give you the best information we have available to us to the extent that it is available. They've been rolling out information over the last 4 weeks or so with their interpretations, and some of these have changed over time, and they'll continue to change presumably as time goes on. But essentially, under the current rules, the forgiveness is based on an 8-week period. The covered period is 8 weeks, and the clock starts ticking the date you get the loan. So you've got to keep an eye on your target date, the end of that 8-week period, to determine exactly what you want to pay so you can maximize your forgiveness. And as Lee was saying, the forgiveness is based on factors that are not necessarily identical to the requirements and how much you can borrow. And there's a good possibility, in fact, it's a very strong probability, I would say, that you're not going to be able to get 100% forgiveness. But nevertheless, it's still not a bad deal. It's a 1% loan over 2 years. It's not terrible, and it allows you to keep your employee base intact. Right. So the elements of forgiveness, and let me just back up one bit. There are 2 categories, essentially, of expenditures. There's payroll and then other than payroll. And payroll includes the compensation you pay to your employees, and then obviously the other areas of benefits, which is health insurance, retirement contributions, and state unemployment tax for all the employees, but not for owners. So if you're we don't know exactly what an owner is. I think we're using 20% ownership. Anything above that is counted as an owner. So you can get forgiveness on all the payroll costs up to $100,000 annualized. So what that means is if you're on a biweekly payroll, which most people are, that means up to $15,385 for any one individual employee. That's going to be the max. And then in addition to that, you get the other you get the employee benefits that can be added, but not for owners. And then you also get and included in the employee benefits is the retirement contributions and health insurance, reduced by the amount that's withheld from any employees. Obviously, if the employees are paying a part of that, that wouldn't be eligible for forgiveness. And then also you get to deduct, or what is eligible for forgiveness is the unemployment compensation you pay to the state. Somebody asked the question, they submitted a question, if they funded their retirement plan, normally they fund it throughout the course of the year, but if they funded the whole thing during the 8-week period, there's nothing that says you can't do that, but I would suggest that that's probably not going to be something they're going to accept. I'm sure we'll get some clarification as time goes on, but I would be hesitant to say that go ahead and fund the full amount, because I think the intent of this program is to reimburse you for that 8-week period. And if you would not normally have funded that plan, the entire plan for the whole year, in that 8-week period, I would think that they would have a hard time accepting that. So I put that out there for you to make your own judgments. And then in addition, if you're self-employed, owner compensation, which is calculated based on, and it's just straightforward, and we don't know, the best information we have available to us right now is if you're self-employed, the forgiveness is just going to be $8.50, 8 weeks, based on your 2019 Schedule C information. The question comes up is, does that actually have to be dispersed as a draw? And I don't have an answer. We don't have an answer for that, and we're going to have to wait for further clarification. The other items that can be deducted, that can be eligible for forgiveness, and there are three categories: mortgage interest, and that's to be distinguished from other interest on other debt. You are allowed to use the money for interest on other debt, but that is not eligible for forgiveness. They distinguish that from mortgage interest. So mortgage interest is eligible, rent payments are eligible, utility payments, and utility is a number of different categories. They even have items in there for transportation with no clarification. We don't know what that means, and so we're waiting to hear exactly what that's going to include for utility payments. So the requirement for forgiveness is for every $1 of payroll, let me say it differently, for every $3 of payroll cost, you're eligible for forgiveness for $1 of these other 3 categories: mortgage interest, rent, and utility payments. So in the example that we gave, if you have a $100,000 loan, well, let me give you the extreme. If you have no payroll, you have no forgiveness. You don't get anything other than, you don't get anything at all at that point. So that if you have a $100,000 payroll, $75,000 to maximize forgiveness, $75,000 has to be for payroll, and then you're eligible to take $25,000 for these other categories of mortgage interest, rent, and utility payments. So essentially, it's a 1-to-3 ratio. For every $3 of payroll, you can be eligible for forgiveness for $1 of these other categories. There is a caveat, and that is that there's a reduction of the payroll based on two categories. There's a head count test and there's a salary count test. The head count is you've got to have the same number of people covered it's an average per month that they calculate. So they compare the 8-week period, an average per month number of employees employed, with the most recent quarter. So if we're looking now, we'd probably be looking at January, February, and March. So they would look at the number of full-time equivalents, and we don't exactly know how they're going to define that, if it's going to be based on 40 hours. There's some discussion that it could be based on 30 hours a week. But what you're going to do is you're going to take your calculations, determine how many full-time equivalents you have during a period, and you have a choice of 2 different periods that you're measuring against. You can either look at from the period February 15th, 2019 to June 30, 2019, take that period and come up with a calculation of an average number of employees per month, and compare that with the number of average numbers of employees per month in the 8-week period following the date of your loan. The other period you get to pick and choose which period you want to use, which you want to compare against. The other period is the first 2 months of 2020, from January 1 to February 29. So obviously you're going to want to take the period that has the lowest number of employees, and then you can go from there and compare that. If for example, you have during the period that you choose, if you have 8 employees, and then during the period of the 8-week period, you have the covered period, you have 6 employees, then your forgiveness is going to be reduced by 1/4, 2/8. So that's the first element of reduction. The second element is a salary test, and what they're requiring you to do is you look at the salaries earned by the people who work. I guess it would be the most recent quarter, and if any of those people were working during the covered period, you're going to compare their salaries. And so, for example, if an employee earned during the covered period, and remember, this is a key issue, the period that they're using to measure is a quarter. So that's 13 weeks. If during a covered period is only 8 weeks, so it's going to be pretty hard for anybody, unless you give them a big raise or a bonus, to have them be eligible to get 100% forgiveness. But that's how the law is written. So if you have 8 weeks and somebody worked exactly the same rate, then you're going to get 8/13. You're going to have a reduction of 5/13 for each employee. And that would be measured on an employee by employee basis. That's a dollar reduction, not a percentage reduction. So that's how the forgiveness is intended to work. I'm sure we will be getting some additional clarification as these additional interpretations are rolled out to us, and we'll be standing by waiting to find out exactly what that's going to look like. But that's yet to be determined. There are some open items. There's a lot of open items. And again, our objective today is to give you the benefit of the best information we have available, our opinions. But I wanted to highlight some of the items that are not determined at this point. This is already alluded to. Lee mentioned this. Forgivable expenses. Rent is forgivable, but does that mean just rent for your office? Does it also mean equipment rent? So that's yet to be determined. Also rent that you pay to yourself, self-rental, if you own the building. Or you have an LLC that owns the building. Is that going to be something that would be eligible for forgiveness? Under utilities, they mentioned that transportation was a category of expense. We don't know exactly what that means. It'll be interesting to find out. Computation of full-time equivalents, number of hours per week. Is it 30 hours? Is it 40 hours? That's yet to be determined. The last item, probably the most important item on this list, has just been determined as of 7 o'clock last night. The IRS issued a notice. This was a question that we were all wrestling with. When you have forgiveness, they were very specific in the law. The law said that forgiveness was not taxable. Normally, when you have debt forgiveness, you pay tax on that. It's considered income. They were very specific and said it is not taxable. However, the question was, but what about the expenses that you are paying with those forgiven dollars, that forgiven debt? Is that going to be deduction? And if it was going to be a double dip. It would mean you're getting expense deduction for these expenses that you didn't really pay for because you're being reimbursed for it through these forgiveness of notes. Well, the IRS came out last night, not to any surprise to me, I don't think. They made it very clear. There is no double dip. So you will not, there is no tax deduction for these expenses that are for the debt that's forgiven. So it's still not a bad deal. It's still a 2-year loan, 1% loan. And I don't think it's something that I would walk away from. I think it's still worthwhile. But that's the best of what we know right now. And this changes from day to day. So all I can say is stay tuned for these other items, and I'm sure we'll be getting further clarification. There is a number of questions that were submitted. Maybe I can kind of go through some of these, and Lee, welcome to jump in. The first one is how do the economic injury disaster loan work? Well, if you have one of those loans, if you borrowed money on the EIDL loan, you can't carry that and have a PPP loan at the same time. So what they've done is, at such point in time as the PPP loan proceeds were granted, they added that in. You can't carry them both together. So they actually will build that into the total note, and that'll be the end of the EIDL part. What will the IRS want to see in order to have the PPP forgiven? Well, we don't know exactly, but I can tell you that for payroll, you probably want to have your payroll records. If you're using a payroll service, ADP or Paychecks, that probably would be the best place. You would want to have the payroll register for each of the, if you're on a biweekly payroll, each of the 4 payrolls during that 8-week period would be helpful. I would also mention that since we don't exactly know whether you're going to be eligible to get forgiveness for payroll that is paid after the 8-week period, even if it covers part of the 8-week period, I would highly recommend that you have a special payroll on the last day of the 8-week period to make sure that you get that payroll included in that covered period for measurement purposes. We don't know exactly how that's going to be, but I think you should plan on doing that at this point.
Hey, Jared, can I chime in on that one?
Of course.
Yeah, so that's a big issue, right? So a lot of people are asking that question. What counts, right? Is it the date of the check during the 8-week period? What we're hearing, what we're seeing is it's going to have some type of language, costs incurred and paid. So costs incurred and paid. So to Jerry's point, if you're in the 8-week cycle and your 8-week cycle ends on June 12th, but you have a regular payroll that's dated June 13th, you might want to start planning now to reel that payroll back a day or maybe even 2 days to be really safe and bring it into your 8-week cycle. So it most likely would count if they use a paid type language. The second part, when Mnuchin sat the other day, I think he got a little upset with some of the people that maybe took these loans, and he announced that any loan over $2 million will get audited. He wasn't just talking about loans over $2 million. There's going to be loans less than that that are going to get audited. They expect a 4 to 5% fraud on this program. I'm telling all my clients that have gotten the money and the ones that are applying now, we're going to put together a package with support and put a bow on it, make it as clean as it can. So to Jerry's point, payroll's kind of easy, payroll reports. But with regards to the other items, rent, I'm going to include canceled checks for the 8 weeks and a copy of the lease, right? Because remember, the lease had to be in place as of February 15th. For all those utility payments, for all the other expenses, I'm going to include a copy of the bill and a copy of the canceled check. I don't want to leave anything open for interpretation. So So I guess I just want to bring that up, that if you've gotten the money and you're in the process, now's the time to start building that support file and just keep all those documents ready so that when they do give us what the application for forgiveness looks like, we'll be able to put it together, submit it, and hopefully get the loan forgiven.
I think that's key. And I think the key really is to make sure that you're doing it as you go along, because you don't want to have to go back and figure out months from now what's eligible and what's not, what you have to document. I think if you can do it as you go along, you're going to be way ahead of the game. Somebody raised the question, how much is a shareholder of a PC salary treated as a grant in the PPP loan? Well, $100,000 is the max, annualized. It doesn't matter if you're a shareholder or you're an employee. The maximum amount that you can borrow and you can get forgiven is $100,000 per person. Do you have to take employees off unemployment when you receive the PPP? Well, yes, if you want to get forgiveness. You can't get forgiveness if you don't have payroll, and people can't get paid if they're on unemployment. Or I should say they can't get unemployment if they're on payroll. So you have control over that. The question obviously comes up, what if your employees don't want to come back? Well, that's an issue. You have leverage because you can take them off unemployment by indicating that they're eligible to work and you have work for them to do. But this is a unique situation because we don't know what's going to happen when people say, well, they don't want to come back because it's not safe. So we don't know how that's going to be handled. And we're dealing with that as a firm. We had a survey went around to see exactly what we're comfortable with when we go back to work, because we're all working out of our houses, and that's yet to be determined. This is brand new territory, so nobody really knows the answer to that. So we're going to have to wait to see. Somebody raised the question, and I mentioned this earlier. Can the entire profit sharing be funded during that 8-week period? I think that's a bit of a stretch. I wouldn't recommend it. I don't think that they're going to buy it. I think the intent was that they were looking for you to be able to be reimbursed for your expenses for 8 weeks, and I don't think they'd be comfortable in having you put 1 year's worth of profit sharing into that 8-week period. I think they would frown on that. I would say probably not. Can I get forgiveness over the used portion if the PPP, even if it's less than 75%? Sure. Whatever you counts as payroll, you're going to get $1 for every $3 of payroll for forgiveness for the other expenses. Let me put that a little bit more clearly. If you have for every $3 of payroll, you're eligible to take $1 of other expenses, which is the mortgage interest, the rent, and the utility payments can be eligible for forgiveness. If you have no payroll, there is no forgiveness. So it's very simple, very straightforward. Somebody raised the question, if they're an employee dentist, what benefits are they eligible for besides unemployment compensation? Well, as far as the PPP plan, it doesn't apply. There's nothing provided for employees here, for the individual employees, other than the fact that if the employer gets the loan, it enables them to make the payments to start and run payroll. Somebody raised the question about family members. Can they be hired and can they count? I would say be careful. Yes, I think the answer is yes, but be prepared to be able to justify what they're doing. They need to be able to, if you have a 5-year-old, probably not. If you have a 20-year-old or an 18-year-old and they can come in and do specific tasks, as long as you can document, and I would be very careful to make sure, because we don't know exactly how close this is going to be looked at, but I suspect that it will be looked at. Time period to repay the loan. Well, the first 6 months, there's no payments required, but as Lee mentioned, the clock starts ticking the day you get the loan, interest starts accruing, and the loan will be due in 2 years, at the end of 2 years. Can you get the PPP loan and also apply for unemployment? Yes, you can. And I guess that what you'd be getting would be a 2-year, 1% loan, but you wouldn't get any forgiveness. So the answer is yes, but I'm not sure why you would want to do that. Question was currently not operational, and this is probably true for all dental practices today, certainly in Philadelphia and Pennsylvania. If you're not operational, but you're getting the loans, can you bring the full team back with less hours? Yes, but remember that the two tests that you reduce your forgiveness by, one is the head count, and the other is the amount of salary paid. So if you're going to be paying them less salary as compared to the period that you're measuring against, you're going to get a reduction, is what it's going to come down to. It'll be reduced, so you won't be able to get the 100%. So that's you have to bear that in mind. What I've advised clients to do, and the only way you can maximize your forgiveness is if you pay the employees essentially for not working. Now, what can you do? What can you have them do? Can you have them do continuing education? It's a perfect opportunity to take advantage of that if you can. I mean, you shouldn't let the time go completely to waste, but I suspect there's going to be some employees that if you're going to pay them, that they may not be able to do much at all. So that remains to be seen. That's the dilemma that everybody is in that position where their employee base is not working. Tips for independent contractors. Independent contractors are eligible for the Paycheck Protection Program loan, whether or not they have employees. If they have no employees, they can apply for up to $100,000 prorated, which comes out to $15,385. And how you demonstrate the use of those funds, we're not sure yet. I'm sure they'll clarify that. Lee, I'm not sure if you have any input on that, but I don't think we really know. They did say, I mean, they were very specific. They said you can borrow as an independent contractor without employees. And the question is, how are they going to determine?
Jerry, you know where I'm going with that one is, I'm telling the independent contractors because they're typically a Schedule C sole proprietor and they don't have payroll for themselves. I'm saying in that 8-week period, do your best to take the normal draw that you would take, right? So we don't know if they're going to use 2/12 of your 2019 net income from line 31 of your Schedule C, but if they don't really give us a definitive answer, I'd love to be able to have canceled checks in that 8-week period for $15,385, and I could say that was my net income from self-employment during the 8-week period. Hopefully they can do that just to maybe make our forgiveness case even more solid.
Right, I agree. But clearly, if you're an independent contractor, you're eligible. So if you can take advantage of it, I would certainly pursue that. Question is, are employee salaries, rent, utilities during the 8-week periods, 8 weeks immediately following the loan funding, the only time period considered? The answer is yes. There is no provision that I've seen or we've seen that indicates they're going to extend that. I think it would be appropriate, but that's my editorial comment, and it doesn't carry much weight. But clearly, it puts people in your situation in a tough spot because you're not working and your staff is not working. But we'll see what happens. But I don't want to lead anybody to think that that's something that's on the horizon. We don't know. And then there were some questions that came in at the last minute. And I think we probably covered this. If we get the loan and some of the staff doesn't return, that's if they don't come back because they don't feel safe, we don't know how that's going to be addressed. These are questions that everybody is asking, and to the best of our knowledge, under the current rules, as they've been stipulated, if they don't come back, then they're not included, and that could cause a reduction, very possibly, in your forgiveness. And we talked about this. If you assume that PA Unemployment is offering if you're offering your staff employment, you'll notify the unemployment center in Pennsylvania, and they will be precluded from getting benefits going forward. So you have a little bit of leverage. I mean, you can't force them to work, but you certainly have some leverage. And then there's the question. I think we've covered these as far as can you bring your kids in? And yes, absolutely, as long as you can very clearly document the work that they're doing, the tasks that they're performing. And the last question we had was, and we talked about this, if you can't pay the full amount of payroll, if you had a $100,000 loan and you can't pay 75, if you only paid 37.5, how much could you of other expenses would be eligible for forgiveness? And that's the rent, the mortgage interest, and the utilities. Again, it's a 1-for-3 ratio. So for every dollar that you qualify for payroll during that 8-week period, you can pay $1 for rent, utilities, and mortgage interest. So that's the long and short of everything we know at this point.
Jerry, a couple questions came through during the live feed. I'll bounce off you guys. First one, can you review briefly how the owner compensation replacement of profits, 8 divided by 52 of 2000 net profit, works as a forgiveness input?
There was a clarification that came out a couple of weeks ago, how to calculate the maximum loan amount. This was on the SBA website. It came out April 24th. And essentially, remember, the law said you take either the immediate preceding 12 months or the calendar preceding year. And they essentially said that you go back to your Schedule C. You're talking about self-employment person, right, David?
Yeah.
You go back, you take your Schedule C, your net income, and up to $100,000. So you can certainly submit an application for, assuming you're working, you meet the other requirements. You are working on February 15th, 2020. You can submit an application for a Paycheck Protection Program loan for $15,385. So actually, you can submit it for more. I guess you can fit 2.5 12 times $100,000, but you're only going to get forgiveness up to $15,385.
Okay. Here's another one. I don't know who wants to take it. Is there any scenario where not taking the PPP and using other money or a loan makes sense to pay payroll, given that the CARES Act provides for a 50% refund up to $10,000, assuming that $10,000 payroll is deductible and the refunded $5,000 can be used for expenses deductible?
I think what they're referring to, David, is the employee retention credit.
The credit.
And you can't utilize that in conjunction with the PPP loan. It's an either or situation.
Okay, and then one more. Can the loan be used to pay for the time an employee has to stay home because their child is not going to school? Towards the 10
yes.
weeks at 2/3 pay.
Yeah.
If you pay the employee, then you're eligible for those expenses count towards forgiveness.
Yeah.
But again, that's a dilemma that we were talking about just a few moments ago. You know, you're paying employees to not work, and that's the problem. That's the issue that we're dealing with.
Yeah. Hey, David, let me chime in on so you talked about another program, which is the employee retention credit. There's another program out there with regards to some of the packages, and it's the deferment of FICA tax, right? So when it first came out, it was one or the other. You couldn't do a PPP and defer the FICA tax, but in some of the guidance that has come out subsequently, they have said that, I believe the date's March 27th, but if you're incurring payroll right now and you have a PPP loan, you can turn off the company's FICA match, the 6.2%. You can turn that off from now until you get your loan forgiven. So let's use numbers real quick. Let's say that your FICA match from now until sometime in July, when you get your loan forgiven, you incur 20 grand of FICA tax that you didn't pay because you turned it off. You would owe that in 2 installments. You would owe $10,000 on 12/31 of 21 and $10,000 on 12/31 of 22. That's an interest-free loan for a long term, right? So if you're in the program, if you have a PPP loan and you're currently incurring expense, you've brought people back, or you do in the near future, call your payroll company, turn off your FICA match. If you choose to do this, turn it off. And then you would have to pay those two amounts again, 12/31/21 and 12/31/22. I think it's all about cash flow. I think that's a great feature. And again, originally it wasn't allowed with the PPP, but they came out and said during the 8-week period up until you get your forgiveness letter, you are allowed to take advantage of that as well.
Lee, that's a great point. And when we originally saw that, we jumped all over it. I have a number of clients that are doing that. It's very, very easy to do.
Yeah.
If you're on ADP, I've done it with ADP myself. It was just a telephone call, and now you actually can even do it online to set it up. Paychecks, I know, has been very much ahead of the curve, so they're receptive to doing this. It's just a matter of telling them that you're not going to remit this, because they take, typically, if you're on a tax impound basis where the payroll service deducts the money automatically, the tax automatically from your account, they have control. So this way, the money stays in your account. You get to use it for whatever you choose. You pay it back 50% at the end of 2021 and the remainder at the end of 2022. No interest, no questions asked. It's a nice deal. And you can do it for as long until you get such a point in time as you're notified that you're getting forgiveness. Once you get forgiveness, you have to stop referring that. But up until then, you can. So I would take advantage of it. There's no reason not to that I could see.
Agreed.
One more follow-up question. So the employee retention and PPP can't both be used. Is there a scenario where the employee retention credit makes more sense?
Well, the employee retention credit, I think, Lee, is what, $5,000 per employee?
Up to 10. Yep. Yeah.
I guess the question, well, I'll let you answer that, because I'm not.
I think there's other criteria. Yeah, you got to be careful with the employee retention credit. There's unlike the PPP loan where you have to show economic impact. I think you have to show a reduction. You have to show a reduction of 50% in your company, and there are some limitations. So if you have less than 100 employees, I think it's $5,000 on 10,000 of wages, and then there's another one for over 100 employees. So I would imagine there could be a scenario. I just think the PPP is the grand slam, right? So they're going to pay your expenses for 2 months, and it's a forgivable loan that you don't have to pay back. So in most cases, David, if you qualify for their PPP, I'd say 99% of the cases, that's probably going to be the program that is most beneficial. Some clients may choose to just, as Jerry said earlier, at 1% for 2 years, even if I don't open up in this 8-week period, I'll keep this very, very low interest rate loan, and I'll use it for those qualified expenses: payroll, rent, utilities, mortgage interest over 2 years. That rate doesn't get much better than
that. Doesn't look like anything else is coming through. So I think that's it, unless anybody else has any last comments or questions. Dr. Cecchio, thank you for providing the platform. And
I appreciate everything, and we learned so much. It's a little complicated, but thank you so much.
This presentation it was recorded, so it's available. I think it'll be sent out to the participants, and you could also probably share it with some of the other members that weren't able to make it. I think there was a few that expressed interest but weren't able to hop on, so they could probably be shared.
That's great. I really appreciate that, because it's kind of crazy, but trying to do everything you have to do to get back to work. Thank you so much. Very, very, very great. Thank you.
Thanks everyone for hopping on, and thanks Lee and Jerry for the information.
Yep. Be safe.
Yeah, you
Thanks,
be safe.
David.
Thank you. Bye. Thank you.
Take care.
You too. Thank you.